Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 221 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Eilon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and a two-time author. Our second book, From Letters to Leaders, Redefining New Member Education and Leveraging Belonging to Eliminate Hazing, is available on Amazon now. Go and check it out. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, Alpha Omicron Pi's headquarters is only about 10 minutes away from my home, and it's located in Brentwood, Tennessee. The facilities are absolutely stunning, and I remember getting a tour of the building back in 2012 and really appreciating the history that started back in 1897 with Stella, Jessie, Helen, and Elizabeth at Barnard College in my birthplace of New York City. The regular rotation of historical items and the outfits of various leaders within AOPI and the planning of different themes in the museum with this rotation happening all the time, it really struck me, and that shaped what displaying that history could look like for the organization that I joined back in 1994. So I'm super grateful for that opportunity to come and check out their headquarters. Now, our next guest is Annalise Sinclair. She is a homegrown Florida gal that transplanted to South Carolina by way of Ohio. While working on her bachelor's degree in sociology and anthropology at the University of South Florida, she was first diagnosed with chronic depressive disorder coupled with generalized anxiety. And she spent the next 4 years balancing a sorority, academics, marching band, a full-time job, and a secret mental illness. Her first true love is storytelling, whether that be through speaking, blogging, or art. And Annalise is thrilled to be able to share her personal story as a professional college speaker in order to inspire others to seek help for their own mental health struggles. Welcome to the show, Annalise.
Thanks, friend. So glad to be here.
Oh my God, this is going to be so much fun. We have so many common friends, and I just know that this is going to be an absolute blast getting to know you a little bit better. So tell our audience, I mean, you decided on the University of South Florida for your undergraduate experience. Now, South Florida is a beautiful place, don't get me wrong, but you had a lot of choices. Why USF?
So it actually started my sophomore year of high school. I had the opportunity to see the University of South Florida Winter Guard perform at a competition. I did color guard and winter guard throughout high school, and I saw them and I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. I want to be on the USF Winter Guard. And so I applied to USF. I got in, and I ended up making the color guard team. And then USF turned around and said, by the way, we'll give you a full ride. And you can't turn that down. So truly, the reason why I ended up at USF was I wanted to do color guard and join their winter guard team when the opportunity arose. And I got to do it. It was awesome. It was incredible. But that is truly what brought me to USF. And now my younger sister just graduated from USF. Like, we are a Bulls family.
Nice. I absolutely love that story. And I think about my own daughter. I mean, she's heavily involved with the band. She plays the clarinet, she plays the guitar. And through the band, she's going to visit all these different college campuses. And she's performing on the football field, you know, on these various college campuses. So far, it's just been a no. She's like, this is not where I want to be. This is not where I want to be. We haven't found that one campus where she's like, oh, this is my home. But I think it's good for her to go out and check it out. And we'll see where she ends up. But boy, she is way brighter than I am. So she's going to go to a much better school than I did.
That's how you know you have done parenting right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when she says, Dad, yeah, I want to go see Harvard's campus, you're like, okay, all right. So this is where we're going. Okay. It's just wild. But yes, absolutely. Like, that is when you know that you've done everything you can to make sure this human being has everything that she needs to be super successful. And ultimately, like, that is the legacy. That's it's your kid, right?
Yes.
So anyway, it's been surreal for sure as a speaker to kind of go through that process of looking at different college campuses with your own kid. It's been
Yeah.
interesting for sure.
So,
Now,
question.
yeah.
Does Harvard have a marching band?
I don't know. They're great music department. I think she really wants to get involved with the music department there. So she's been combing through the faculty and getting to know like what it is that they do. So it's going to be super interesting. I mean, she also has a love for languages as well. So she's taking Spanish, she's taking French. So there's this language and then there's music. And so how do we combine these two into something really cool, maybe with international flair? Because she's all about going to London, she's about going to, Spain. I mean, she just wants to do it all, and it's super fun to kind of watch it through her eyes.
Yes. If I can recommend anything to any student, it is go abroad as much as humanly possible. I had the chance, I've been to, I think I'm up to like 34 countries.
Good for you.
And the first time, my very first trip abroad, I was 11 years old and I went to Australia.
Very nice.
Without my parents. And being able to do that, my mom will tell you she put one little girl on the plane and a grown woman came back.
I love that. That is great. And I'm jealous. I wish that I took advantage of those opportunities. So hopefully our listeners are thinking about that and going, I'm here. Maybe I should do a study abroad opportunity and take advantage of that, because that's, I think, my one regret about college is I didn't do that. And I know that our kids are going to make up for it in spades. So that's good. That's certainly a good thing. Now let's talk sorority, because you joined AOPI at USF and you eventually served at in Panhellenic Association, Order of Omega, Rho Lambda Panhellenic Honor Society. So what was so special about AOPI at USF that made you want to join?
So I actually did not want AOPI. That was not my choice or my first choice. I came to USF, joined marching band, and I actually became really close to a lot of brothers of a fraternity who happened to be in marching band. I was hanging out with them constantly, and they were like, listen, you should join a sorority, A, so you can bring some more female friends around, and B, because you can't join us. And so I went through sorority recruitment as a sophomore. And because I had already been around Greek students, in my mind, I knew exactly which sorority I was going to be a part of. And then I went through recruitment and I realized that was not a good fit. So AOPI really spoke to me with the idea of you can be yourself. And so the women in the chapter weren't your stereotypical sorority women. They were unique and they were a little bit weird. And it was just this idea that I could be me, 110% just being me. And joining the sorority, it was this weird dichotomy where I wasn't totally honest with my sisters about what was going on in my life, but I had the opportunity to do so much and grow as a human. So it was this weird kind of like, I'm growing, but I'm also hiding things from you guys. And I think that's why I got so heavily involved in other things within Greek life, like Rho Lambda and Panhellenic, because it was easier for me to keep this a little bit of a distance and a wall between my sisters and myself, because I wasn't comfortable talking about my mental illness. I was so afraid I was going to be judged, or that people would think that, oh, she can't run for vice president of XYZ because she has this mental illness. And that fear stopped me from being able to just be myself with my sisters. And it truly, I think it impacted my entire experience because I wasn't able to be myself. And so I couldn't really develop those meaningful relationships. You can't be vulnerable and you can't have that trust if you're hiding things constantly. And so I think I was attracted to AOPI because it gave me the opportunity to be myself, but then I didn't take advantage of it.
Wow. I mean, I'm sure if you came out to your sisters and said, listen, I have bipolar 2 disorder, I mean, I'm sure, and you probably think about this all the time. I mean, they would have embraced you, right? I mean, they would have supported you 110%.
I absolutely think that now.
Right.
When I first started sharing my story, I was 25 years old. So this is several years after I graduated. And I started sharing it through social media. And I had sisters reach out to me and say, I wish I would have known, because I was also struggling with depression or anxiety. I wish I would have known so I could have been there for you. And I have developed more meaningful, deeper relationships as an alumna than I ever did as an undergrad. And I think it's because I'm willing to share this story and talk to my sisters about something that's really hard.
Yeah, I'm sure there were a ton of sisters that were going through similar experiences. But I mean, you learned, and now you understand the power of vulnerability and the types of conversations that could come out of it. And maybe you could have helped somebody back then, but you're doing it now as an alumna. So that works too. And I think your professional experience is pretty interesting as well, because you worked for 3 years at Presbyterian College as the assistant director of student involvement and Greek life. So tell our audience, what is it like working with 10 organizations on a campus and over 500 members?
It was the greatest learning experience of my life. So it was at a really unique time in my life where I was only a year or two older than my students.
Mhm.
And so I am trying to educate them and guide them towards finding this really meaningful experience in Greek life when I'm still trying to figure out how to be an adultier adult, which is not easy. And so I learned more in those 3 years than goodness. Everything from how to run an effective organization to how to have conversations about hazing and sexual assault prevention and bystander intervention on an individual level and an organizational level. Everything from A to Z, you have to learn, especially when you're an office of one. And so I was the only person working with a campus that's 50% Greek.
Mhm.
And so it was a challenge, but so awesome. How many people can say that they have gotten to launch a carnival for the first time at a university, or that they got to bring the first MPHC organization to a campus? Those are things that I'm so proud of. And I don't think if I would have taken advantage of coming to Clinton, South Carolina, where the tea is sweet and silent, that I would have ever had that chance.
Yeah, that sounds like a great opportunity. And then the next really interesting thing about your career, you worked at Pi Lambda Phi Fraternity as a coordinator and then eventually director of chapter services. So what is it like being a member of AOPI and then developing curriculum for a fraternity?
Oof, it was a huge learning curve. The thing that attracted me to Pi Lambda Phi was that they aligned with my values 110%. The fraternity was founded by a group of men who were told that you can't join fraternities because you're Jewish. And so they said, you know what, that's not okay. And instead of creating a Jewish fraternity, they created a fraternity that was non-secular. And it was open to men of all creeds. And for me, that was really, really so important to my values, who I am, who I wanted to grow to be. And to turn around and get to write curriculum to help their members be able to do that and become the best version of themselves was so much fun. I got to write and design and facilitate the very first Pi Lambda Phi Leadership Institute and go to the mountains of Pennsylvania and hang out with a bunch of fraternity men and really challenge them on this idea of diversity and inclusion and being a great leader, but also being a successful follower. Being a woman doing that was especially fun. I felt like I got to make up for all of the years being on panel and council, which the men would never, the IFC men wouldn't listen to us. It's like, well, now they have to listen to me because I'm the boss.
That's so cool. That is so great. And you know what? It really is an interesting organization because if you think back to their founders, they easily could have said, we're going to start this Jewish fraternity. I mean, there are other Jewish fraternities out there, A Pi and numerous others. But they decided, you know what? We're just going to create our own organization, and maybe it's going to have our values embedded in it, but we'll be open to everybody. And so it's just very interesting because I think that's different from what we had seen happen maybe in other organizations that were much more focused on specifically, let's say, Jewish men, and they decided to go the other route. And so very, very interesting indeed. And so now you're doing all these keynotes and programs all over the country in the mental health space. So let's talk about some of your programs. In Be Kind to Your Mind, you go over tangible ways where you can practice self-compassion in your everyday routine. So give our listeners an example of what does that look like, self-compassion in an everyday routine.
So normally when we think of like the word self-care, it is very much so like, I'm going to take a bubble bath and light some scented candles and it's going to be delightful. But it's not actually self-care if while you're sitting in that bubble bath, you're thinking of all the things you should be doing. And so I really like to say, instead of practicing self-care, we should practice self-compassion. And so, yes, the means can be taking a bubble bath, but while you're sitting in that bubble bath, thinking about what your body needs, what your soul needs to be the best version of you, to be happy, to be confident, to be at peace, to just be. That is one of the hardest things for me personally to do, is this idea of just be, sit and not think about the future, not think about the past, be in the moment. And so the program is really about this idea of how can we be kind to ourselves and practice this idea that you don't always have to be busy. You don't always have to be okay. You don't always have to be perfect. Sit in some of the uncomfortable and let yourself grow in those moments in which things get difficult, and be a real human, be a human.
Yeah, for me, that's the most difficult thing, is just sitting in the uncomfortable. I mean, my body resists it. Like, I am a problem solver. So if there's a problem with my wife and I, it's like, all right, Super Mike to the rescue. He's here to fix everything and everything is going to be okay. And sometimes she just wants to sit in the uncomfortable with me. Right. And so for her, like, she really needs that. But I'm immediately to, how do I fix this? But she's like, I don't necessarily want to go to that stage. Like, I just want to sit in it. And so it's like, so for me, it's always been a challenge, but at least now I can recognize that. And I think now I do a better job of just empathizing about where, like, let's say she is at that moment, and just sitting with her and just supporting her in that moment, and not and trying to resist the need to always try to fix everything. Like, it's okay. We don't need to fix everything necessarily. Maybe we just need to talk about it and sit in it. And so, but that's a really, really hard thing for me to do. Really, really tough, because it's uncomfortable. Like, nobody wants to sit in grief. Nobody wants to sit in unhappiness. Or at least I don't. So, so that's so hard. But I'm glad that that you talk about that. In another program, it's called "How Are You? Friendship, Tough Conversations, and Mental Health." Here you talk about opening up with friends about how we're really feeling if we're going through, let's say, a crisis. So how can we embrace that vulnerability and actually share our feelings and emotions when you went through it? I mean, you know how tough it is to share what you're really going through, what you were going through in college. So how do we embrace that and actually just share?
I think one of the easiest fixes is finding the small moments in every day in which you can have just that one moment of vulnerability. So if you think of the question, how are you? How do we normally respond?
I'm fine.
I'm fine. I'm good. It's okay.
Yeah.
When in actuality, like, the world feels like it's on fire. And in some places it literally is on fire. So in those moments in which we're with our friends or with our family, when we ask, how are you? Use that as a moment to actually talk about what's going on in our lives. And it can be something as simple as, you know what, I'm really tired. that small moment of vulnerability creates a moment of connection. And the more that we lean into the connection, genuine connection between humans, we're able to start fostering and breeding vulnerability. And so maybe you go to a friend and you ask, how are you? And they say, no, I'm good, I'm fine. And you followed up with that second, no, really, how are you? And they start talking about, well, this is what's going on. Then the next time you see them, they may freely offer that information. It's creating those channels of trust, really, to be able to just be yourself, share what's going on in your life. I wish so desperately that I could go back in time, and on those days in which my sorority sisters asked me, how are you? I was honest. Instead of saying, I'm good, I'm fine. The reason I can't come to that chapter meeting is I'm sick. And in actuality, I couldn't get out of bed because I was so depressed. If I would have been honest, I think that my entire experience would have been different. And I could have had more of those meaningful relationships.
Yeah. I feel like in college, we've somehow normalized, just being busy all the time, being tired all the time, being stressed out all the time. And so, we just kind of confront that as the norm, and then we don't really talk about it. We just bottle all of that up and just say, well, that's how everybody is feeling. So I'm just not going to talk about it. I'm going to say I'm fine, because that's the norm. I mean, just bananas stuff happening all over the place. That's the norm. And so somehow we have to get to that vulnerability piece. And I'll admit, when somebody says, how are you doing? I'm always like, oh, I'm great. But the truth is, like we just got through conference season. I was exhausted. I'm getting 4 hours of sleep a night for days on end, and I'm just tired. I just want to go to bed. So I don't know, it's just, we're so preconditioned to saying everything is okay. And maybe we just need to start talking about our feelings more. But as a guy, I'll be honest with you, we just never did that. We just never talked about our feelings. That just wasn't like a conversation. And somehow we have to normalize that, especially within men's groups.
Yeah, one of the biggest takeaways I ever had from Pi Lambda was they do something called good and welfare. At the end of all of their chapter meetings, every chapter across the country who does things the right way, every brother has a chance to stay for the good and welfare of Pi Lambda Phi, and they share whatever is on their heart, whatever's on their mind. And it could be something as simple as like, I aced that test, or they can talk about their feelings. They can talk about breakups. They can talk about things that they're not happy with within the chapter. But every brother gets that moment to share.
Yeah.
And that sharing is so powerful. It's so powerful. It totally sets the tone for how our friendships are established. And those connections are just so important.
Yeah. Now, let's talk a little bit about new member ed, because I will tell you that there was never any mental health discussions in my new member ed process, okay? It just didn't exist. And I'm glad that we're making progress. It feels like today's undergraduates are talking about it a little bit more. And in Sold on Sisterhood, you talk about mental health within the new member process. How can we prevent our new members from becoming totally overwhelmed in the new member ed process?
I really think it's a two-part answer there. The first thing is we have to be honest when we're selling sisterhood. We'll often, and I know this as being a Panhellenic advisor and also being a recruitment counselor as an undergrad, we will have, for sorority women, these canned responses to women's concerns. So they'll say, I don't know if I have time. Well, it's okay. Like, we're flexible. Or I don't know if I have the money. We have payment plans. Well, you know what? That's not always accurate. We may have payment plans, but they still may not be financially able to commit. The time commitment of joining a Greek organization is huge. And we have to be honest about that from the start. Because if you set expectations and they're not met by the chapter does not reciprocate and meet the new members' expectations, you're going to have a disconnect. And that's going to impact their mental health because they will feel like they're not good enough, they're not committing enough. It creates this perfect storm, and that's when our new members burn out. And by the time they become seniors, they're outie. They are not about this anymore because they were sold something that they didn't get. The other side of that is fostering that sense of being able to be yourself and be honest and be real. I know when I went through the recruitment process, there was such an emphasis on being a great, strong woman. Well, great, strong women fall apart. And that's okay. And that's so powerful to be able to develop resiliency, to be able to become more confident. And I think if we, during the new member process, tell our members, you know what, you're not going to be okay all the time, but being a part of a sisterhood means you have a safety net to catch you and to love you and to lift you up and to help you. If we are able to do that during the new member process, then that is setting a foundation for a sisterhood that checks all the boxes. You know, are we there for each other? Do we love one another? Are we making our members not better than other people, but the best versions of themselves?
Mm-hmm. I love that. And you know what, Gen Z, just to add on to that, I think Gen Z also wants honesty and transparency. And so
Yes.
why is it that we have a syllabus for calculus class, but we don't have a syllabus, a one-page document for fraternity and sorority life? I mean, we literally had chapters that were like hiding the amount of money that the new members needed to pay for their pledge and initiate fees, just because they were afraid if they were actually honest about how much they were going to have to pay, that they would lose those members. And I'm like, you know, we need to put everything on the table and basically say, this is what the expectations are for joining this brotherhood or joining this sisterhood, and let Gen Z students see the honesty and transparency from the very beginning, because that's the only way to have a good foundation within this organization. Trust. Yep. Right?
100%, 100%. If you don't have trust as the basic foundation of any relationship, not just Greek relationships, you're in for a rocky road.
Totally, 100% there. And then in one other program I wanted to talk to you about, it's called in Greek Unity, Not My Chapter and Other Lies We Tell Ourselves. You talk about all the PR problems that are being experienced in our fraternities and sororities today. What are some strategies that our listeners can use to create a better public image for our organizations?
The $1 million question, right? I think that really we need to stop focusing on all of the extras. So nobody cares about your t-shirts. Honestly, they don't. Because in 10 years, you're going to have a t-shirt quilt and it'll be great and fantastic and it'll end up in the attic. That's not what we need to be focusing time on. People don't care necessarily about I am a big advocate for philanthropy done right. Right now, the way that most Greek organizations function, when we do philanthropy, we're just exchanging money between chapters. If you give me $100, I'll give you $100. We've just supported each other's philanthropies. We raised $100. No, you didn't. You didn't raise any money. And so instead of doing philanthropy events that make us, oh, good job us, and then putting it out there into social media or into the world, into the news, or relying on our t-shirts to help build our brand, the best way to start changing the paradigm and start changing the conversation around fraternities and sororities is to really lean into how we are making our members the best versions of themselves. I think member spotlights are fantastic. Let's talk about how our brotherhood or sisterhood helped build this person up. The events that we do, yay, good for us, good for us. I care more about how we are making the world a better place, making our members better members, and doing what our founders set out for us to do, which is to create a sense of belonging on a college campus. And I think that helps us recruit, because something like 93% of all college students or all freshman students who are surveyed say that the number one thing that they are seeking on a college campus is a sense of belonging. Why aren't we using that as our marketing tool?
Right.
You know, the Greek Olympics, cool, great, awesome. In 2 years, nobody will remember who won, but they will remember if we say that we are creating a safe space for students to feel like they belong.
Yeah. I love that. And certainly that's why I joined, because I was in a school of 30,000 students and I didn't feel like I belonged, so much so that I almost gave up and quit school completely. But luckily the fraternity found me and now I had a place to belong. But it's hard to explain to somebody who's not in a Greek organization what brotherhood really is or what sisterhood really is. It's this abstract idea that we know what it is, but others might not really get it. And I think you were right on by saying, hey, if we want to focus on good PR, let's talk about how we're making better members and do a member spotlight, or how we're making our community a better place because we volunteered at a soup kitchen and fed the hungry in our community. So I think if we just take everything in a PR perspective from that lens, how are we making better members and how are we making our community better? And everything that we show on social media is through that lens, then other people are going to want to join us because they want to do good things too. They want to improve themselves as well. Just that simple.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that something like, I haven't done a survey or anything, but I am convinced the majority of my Instagram followers follow me because I volunteer at the Humane Society every week and post pictures of puppies on my story.
Yeah, who doesn't love puppies? I mean, come on.
For real. And I think back, I'm like, man, if my sorority would have done that,
yeah,
I could have so many followers.
yeah,
Because people want to see things that give you the warm fuzzies. And so I love volunteering. It's at my core, like charity is a huge part of my life. And so, how are we making the world a better place?
yeah. And you feel good. I mean, that's what really builds those bonds of brotherhood and sisterhood, is to do good in the community together and work shoulder to shoulder towards making a better community. If you do that, your bonds are going to be so great in your organization, so much more so than the social event. I mean, if we're just drinking, I'm not really sure that we necessarily feel that bond. But if we're making our community better, then we feel really good when we walk away that somehow the world is a better place because we were here. And I think that is our responsibility as fraternity and sorority leaders, to make sure that we're doing on a regular basis. And that is what's going to increase the brotherhood and sisterhood, if you're really looking for those ideas. So all of this is fantastic. Now, you're living in South Carolina these days, and I'm not all that far away, and I love eating good food. I mean, I'm just saying. So is there a particular restaurant that you absolutely love there in South Carolina that I should check out the next time I'm in town?
I'm really lucky in the fact that I live in it's a small town called Travelers Rest, South Carolina. Yes, that's the actual name of the town. And it has become a foodie destination. If you travel down Main Street, we don't have chain restaurants in our town. One of my most favorite places is a place called Treehouse Cafe. It is an art studio, and it's got art from all local artists, as well as they do art classes for kids. So you get to see all the kids' art, and they have a spicy blackberry and bacon sandwich. And I know that sounds super weird, but it's so good. And they have some of the best coffee drinks and espressos and things like that. And the majority of the baristas are all high school students, local students, and they get to create the menu for the drinks. And these kids come up with some crazy stuff that's so good. And so I adore the Treehouse Cafe. It's one of my favorite places. And it's a really cool place just to sit and hang out. I'm a big people watcher. And so to sit and watch these kids, painting for the first time, or creating paper mache. They've never got to do that. It's so cool to watch their little brains work, as well as enjoy some really good food.
That sounds great. Blackberry and bacon. That's definitely not something I would normally put together, but now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, that's probably really good.
It's also, and I don't know if it's got like a jalapeno jelly, or there's jalapenos in blackberry jelly. I don't know what it is, but it's spicy, it's sweet, and it's savory. And I'm like, how is this possible? It's so good. If I could eat that like every day, I would.
They did the impossible. That sounds absolutely fantastic. This has been so much fun. So if our listeners, if they want to connect with you, if they want to bring you in as a speaker on their campus, where should they go to connect with you?
The best place to go is my website. It's just AnnaliseSinclair.com. And if you go there /contact, I actually have it set up so that anyone who is interested in just hanging out, chatting, talking about bringing me to your campus, or even just talking through ideas and challenges, can set up an appointment with me for 15 minutes, half an hour, or an hour for free. And I will come and hang out with you via Zoom or on a phone call, put you on my calendar right away. So that is the number one best way to get in contact with me.
That's fantastic. You just made an offer that every college student is going to want to take advantage of. So I hope you have a lot of free time because you're going to be meeting with students all over the country now. Is that okay?
100%. That is my life. Okay. That's what I love to do. If I could be a perpetual, just like live on campus, but also have an adult life, like an adultier life. College campuses are the best.
Amen. I hear you. I feel exactly the same way. So we're totally aligned on this. So you know what, Annalise, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for being on our show, for sharing your important message on mental health and everything else that you do. I just think you're amazing. And just want to say thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And to our listeners, I hope you really enjoyed this conversation with Annalise. Make sure that you like it on social media. Make sure that you share it with other fraternity and sorority members on your campus. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.